Good morning. Good morning. There's still some snow out there. Isn't that wonderful? Welcome to Horizon Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Pam Schumann. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm serving as your worship associate this morning. I'm joined by our worship leader, Reverend Chris Rothbauer, whose pronouns are they, them, their. We're excited to welcome you to our worship service this morning. We're so glad you are with us today, whether you're joining us in person or virtually, whether you're here for the first time or whether you've been here for longer than you can remember. Here at Horizon, we welcome people of all faiths, or of no faith in particular. Whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are on your journey, you are welcome among us. Please be our guest after the service for coffee and conversation in Fellowship Hall. As a community, we also welcome the sharing of joys, sorrows, and concerns. You are welcome to fill out a joys and sorrows slip on the table near the Welcome Center when you came in, or in the pockets on the backs of the chairs, or on the joys and sorrows table down here. And you are also welcome to light a candle. This can be done at any time before the service or in service from the beginning through the Offertory. There are a few announcements in your order of service, but we have a special one from our board president, Lisa Casto.
Morning. I bet you can't guess why I'm up here. Today is the day, our mid-year congregation meeting. So you all are all invited to stay, plus you'll be smelling it soon, a delicious lunch from this coming of age class, for fundraising for their trip to Boston, and they're having tacos, all kinds of tacos on the side. So definitely come donate and enjoy a nice taco while you come to the congregation meeting. At the congregation meeting, you're going to hear about a lot of exciting things that are happening. If we talked about everything that was happening, we would be here until tomorrow morning. We're not going to do that to you. So you can bring your tacos in here, eat carefully, please. And please, 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 whether you're a member or a friend or a visitor, you're very welcome to join us. It starts at noon in here. Thank you.
Our call to worship this morning is from David Breeden. Welcome to a new story. Welcome to a day unwritten. We gather to speak of possibility. We remember the losses, we celebrate the victories, we embrace the possible over the probable, weaving a story of hope. Join us in the new story. Join us in the day unwritten. Join us in the future of possibility.
Our chalice lighting this morning is also from David Breeden. We tender this flame, opening the book, turning to a page yet to be written, opening a story yet to be told. May we fill this fresh page wisely. May we write a story, new story into being. May we together inscribe this page with hope. Please join me in our affirmation, which is printed on the back of your order of service and projected on the screen. Love is a doctrine of our church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in harmony with the earth. Thus do we covenant together. And now I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join in singing our opening hymn, number 128 in the gray hymnal, For All That Is Our Life.
For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. For needs which others serve, for services we give, for work and its rewards, for hours of rest and love, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life. For sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain, and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life. For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad.
Well, today I'm not going to be calling anybody up because I am going to be having a whole congregation discussion with you in a second. And so, if you have brought donations for our charity partner, MetroCrest Services, please put them in the basket or in the lobby in the marked baskets after the service. How do you know when you're doing a project, or not just a school project or a work project, but just like a project at your house? Maybe you're painting your kitchen or doing something like that. How do you know it's done? And I'm not just going to ask kids, but I'm going to ask adults too. How do you know when you're finished with a project? What's your reasoning? I'd love to hear it.
When's the deadline?
Oh, when's the deadline? Yeah, that's a good one. That's kind of how I operate. Oh, before you mess it up? Oh, interesting. I never anticipated that. Go ahead.
If it works.
Oh, if it works. Yeah. Okay, one more maybe.
I usually try to think of what that's going to look like when I start. If it's something where I need to go, okay, is this good enough? Does it work? Or if there's a finished product that needs to happen at the end, so I can kind of tell.
Okay, so it's a lot. So I'm going to try to paraphrase. So it is if you have a vision, and then you keep working at it, and then you have some criteria, like if it works, if you're happy with it, may I say? Yeah, then you're done. So I have a book today that I'm going to read to everyone, and when you hear the book, think about how it applies to your own life and the story you're writing about your life. I am going to sit, even though I don't have anybody up here. So our book today is Ish by Peter H. Reynolds. Ramon loved to draw. Anytime, anything, anywhere. One day, Ramon was drawing a vase of flowers. His brother, Leon, leaned over his shoulder. Leon burst out laughing. "What is that?" he asked, like the helpful big brother. You know how they are. Ramon could not even answer. He just crumpled up the drawing and threw it across the room. Leon's laughter haunted Ramon. He kept trying to make his drawings look right, but they never did. After many months and many crumpled sheets of paper, Ramon put his pencil down. "I'm done." Marisol, his sister, was watching him. "What do you want?" he snapped.
I was watching you draw, she said. Ramon sneered. I'm not drawing. Go away. Marisol ran away, but not before picking up a crumpled sheet of paper. Hey, come back here with that. Ramon raced after Marisol up the hall and into her room. He was about to yell, but he fell silent when he saw his sister's walls. He stared at the crumpled gallery. This is one of my favorites, Marisol said, pointing. That was supposed to be a vase of flowers, Ramon said, but it doesn't look like one. Well, it looks vase-ish, she explained. Vase-ish? Ramon looked closer. He studied the drawings on Marisol's wall and began to see them in a whole new way. They do look ish, he said. Ramon felt light and energized. Thinking ishly allowed his ideas to flow freely. He began to draw what he felt, loose lines, quickly springing out without worry. Ramon once again drew and drew the world around him. Making an ish drawing felt wonderful. He filled his journals. Tree-ish, house-ish, boat-ish. Afternoon-ish, fish-ish, sun-ish. Ramon realized he could draw his feelings too. Peace-ish, silly-ish, excited-ish. It's hard to say. His ish art inspired ish writing. He wasn't sure if he was writing poems, but he knew they were poem-ish. Ponder, pond, ponder, dream yonder. Pond, pond, yonder, yon, yon, yon. Clean wander. Oh, dream wander. So sorry, Ramon. One spring morning, Ramon had a wonderful feeling. It was a feeling that even ish words and ish drawings could not capture. He decided not to capture it. Instead, he simply savored it. And Ramon lived ishfully ever after. Yes, thank you. I love that book too. I did want to say that it's a very exciting day. It's the beginning of the second semester. Our 4th through 6th OWL class is starting today. We have a lot of nervous preteens in the room, I know. Your teachers would like you to come directly to the OWL room, 4th through 6th graders, and it is that are an OWL, and it is right across from the sanctuary. You just go straight out the door, and I see Mr. Eric waiting for you already, one of your teachers. And everybody else, we are having class too, so let's go ahead and sing you out to our rooms.
May your mind be open to new learning. May your lips bring truth into the world. May your heart know love and your hands do the work of justice as you go your way in peace. As you go your way in peace.
Hi, good morning. This is where I get to tell my story. Yay. Real quick, I'm Sarah Nadel. I usually sit in the back. So this is my Horizon story. I knew Horizon existed long before I knew that I belonged here. I would drive up and down the street out here, Hebron, going to and from places, noting that there was that church that's on the curve. And I always thought that the church had a little bit of a quirky, weird, interesting structure up front. And I also noted it didn't have big crosses on the steeple or out front or anything like that. So for several years, I didn't know the denomination. I didn't know the name of this place. It was just that church along the curb. And then one day, I was talking with a friend about my dissatisfaction of the previous church that I was attending. There wasn't any childcare at that place, and our boys at that time were in elementary school age, so they were a lot of energy. There wasn't really any community involvement at the other church, but mostly my pro-social cause mindset really wasn't yielding productive conversations. And so that was just kind of really important to me. So with that said, I was on the search for a church. Now this friend, he's a Methodist. That's okay. He suggested I might want to check out a Unitarian church. And I was like, what? I've never heard of such a thing. And he loosely described the UU faith as being liberal. Great. So I went online to search up for a Unitarian church, and I found that there was one that I had been driving past for years. Great. Now, the first service that we attended was a youth-led service. I don't know if y'all have had the fun of experiencing that, but I just knew it was atypical, that this was a little different than normal. So we had to come back the next week to see what was a normal service. I noted that the songs were inclusive of all religious views, that the Affirmation hit on things that I believed in, but mostly I felt very warmly welcomed. It didn't feel stuffy, and we were accepted regardless of where we had been in our faith prior. But best of all, our boys were able to play with other kids and explore the topics that were being discussed in the main service here. Since then, we've become more involved, getting more involved, helping where it's needed, teaching our boys, Elliot is in the back corner, to be helpful, whether that means moving chairs, helping out in the kitchen, fundraiser events, by the way, tacos today, or gardening, or whatever is needed. I feel like Horizon fits me like a glove. We don't shy away from difficult topics, right? Sometimes we lean into the hard things. We embrace people from all vantage points. We take action. We actually get out and do things in the community, and I love that. And best of all, that sometimes we have a little bit of fun. We've got performances. We have musicians that have come to visit. We do some things that are off-site. We do some things that are on non-Sundays here at the church. I felt like the Horizon UU Church was the easy first step. It was the introduction to the larger creed and purpose. And with a positive church experience, later came advocacy, right? Y'all got me in. I was like, yeah, I like the church. And then I actually started paying attention. So many of y'all know I have a nonprofit where we drive victims of domestic violence to safe places. So while driving victims to shelters and making small talk on that drive, sometimes the women that I help, they talk about how faith is important to them, how it's something that they draw upon for strength or guidance, and how society is or isn't taking care of their needs. Or, it may be the emotional struggle, trying to figure out, where do I go? What steps do I take? What's it going to be like? Thanks to the sermons and all the topics that we do and all the meaningful conversations that I have with all of y'all from time to time, it has prepared me to navigate some of those conversations with respectful of all faith views and non-faith views, being able to agree with needs of all types and concerns for the society, and trying to take care of each other, and to listen carefully, offering up hopefully the right words of encouragement to keep those women moving forward. I have enlightened many of my clients about the Unitarian Universalist views, talking about how UU churches everywhere are places that will radically welcome them if they ever choose to show up and attend a service. So in closing, Horizon UU Church, this very building, this body of members, has the potential to spark change and to reach more people who also feel maybe they don't fully fit in with their previous or current church. We have the ability to grow, to evolve, to wake up communities everywhere of folks who feel like maybe they've been left behind. And I look forward to what we will do in the coming years, and I plan to be here and helping out in whatever way that I can. Thank you.
A religious community is like a river formed from the many streams of our lives that meet and merge and flow to the sea. As members and friends of this religious community, we share our time and energy, our creativity, imagination, and vision, our talents, skills, and gifts, and the streams of our individual lives to create a river that is both deep and broad, a river that is made of many streams, sustains life, and refreshes the land through which it flows. But the river of this community also depends on our shared financial support, which makes real our shared values and vision. We will now receive an offering for the support of this religious community and its work in the world. You are invited to give generously and joyfully as you are willing and able. Thank you to our members and friends who give and pledge electronically. If you would like to give electronically, you may do so on the Breeze app or online at horizonuu.org/donate. The offering will now be joyfully given and received, and thank you for your generosity.
I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open.
The first reading comes from Ozan Varol. In October, I was in London to keynote a private event. October in London doesn't exactly scream sunshine. It was cold and gray and rainy, the kind of weather that makes most people stay in and curl up under a blanket. But no one in London seemed to care. People were out in droves. Crowds gathered outside pubs, pint glasses in hand. Restaurants were packed, even the outdoor patios. People huddled under umbrellas or under heaters, but were still out there, fully alive. That made me think about the stories we tell ourselves and how powerful they are. People aren't born hating the rain. To a kid, rain isn't a problem, it's an opportunity. They stomp in puddles and smear mud on their hands and laugh through the mess. But after hearing, "You can't go out, it's raining," or "Get out of the mud," enough times from adults, they start to believe it. Rain is gross, stay inside. Once that belief takes root, it's no longer just raining outside, it's raining inside your head too. What happens if we rewrite the story? What if instead of saying, "It's raining, you better stay in," we say, "What a beautiful rainy day. Let's go outside and have some fun." This isn't just a hollow affirmation. It's about experimenting with a different story, putting on a coat, stepping out into the drizzle, and just seeing what happens. You might discover you love the sound of the rain hitting the leaves, or the way everything smells richer, like the whole world just got a reset. And it's not just about the rain. We all have stories we live by that aren't fixed truths, They're just old scripts we've been following without realizing it. If you tell yourself travel is exhausting, you'll only notice the hassles, the delayed flights, the cramped seats, and miss the little joys along the way. If you tell yourself you're awkward in social situations, you'll tense up before conversations even begin, missing moments that could have been easy and fun. The point isn't to force yourself to love every rainy day or magically turn into an extrovert. It's about creating space to question the stories you've been living by and experiment with something new. You're not committing to anything forever. You're just saying, what if? When you play with the stories you've been telling yourself, you realize they are just that, stories. And if you don't like the story, you can change the story. But don't change everything all at once. Just crack the door open. Put on a raincoat. Step outside. See what the world feels like when the rain has just fallen. See what you feel like. The rain isn't going anywhere, but maybe that old story is. And who knows, you might just find yourself outside, pint in hand, loving every drop.
In the 1940s, despite a hostile political system, Viktor Frankl had managed to find success despite the circumstances. The middle of 3 children to a civil servant in a Jewish family in Vienna, Frankl, inspired by the work of pioneering psychiatrists Sigmund Freud and Alfred Adler, studied medicine at the University of Vienna and became an accomplished and respected doctor and psychiatrist. Even as the Nazi Party occupied Vienna, Frankl found ways to continue serving, focusing on treating people who were suicidal, as well as serving as the head of neurology at the last hospital in Vienna that was admitting Jews. By 1941, he even was married to a nurse at the hospital. Yes, despite living in a turbulent and hostile world, Frankl was making a life for himself. 9 months after his marriage, though, he and his family were sent to the Therzizant concentration camp. One by one, his father, mother, wife, and brother each died at the hands of the Nazis. Frankl himself had a brief stay at Auschwitz before being sent to a Dachau work camp. During his time, he witnessed unspeakable suffering, even as his own body deteriorated and his situation remained tenuous. However, he survived where many others did not. After the war, he eventually remarried and became one of the most noted psychologists and philosophers of the 20th century. In his 1946 book, A Psychologist Experiences the Concentration Camp, later renamed Man's Search for Meaning, Frankl reflected on what allowed himself and others to persevere and survive when so many others didn't. Frankl was able to reflect that when the Nazis came for him, he'd been writing a PhD dissertation. Now, fearing that they would destroy it, he hid it under his clothes, hoping his captors would not find it. Unfortunately, he was not successful, and he watched in horror as his hard work was destroyed, an early indignity of what was to become many. What kept Frankl going, he said, was the desire to survive the concentration camps so he could eventually rewrite his dissertation. In fact, it became a near obsession, his reason to continue to exist even as he did not know the fate of his loved ones. He sincerely believes that his desire to rewrite his work allowed him to survive the concentration camp, even as so much death surrounded him. He didn't believe his experience was unique. He reflected that it was possible at the concentration camp to predict who would be the next to perish based on whether they had lost the will to live. The people who survived were those who had a reason to. Frankl would later sum it up in this way: those who have a why can bear almost any how. It's not that his desire to rewrite his thesis made everything else that happened okay or without sorrow, but it gave him a reason to live and allowed him to bear hardship. Frankl's experiences reinforced a belief he first began developing in medical school, that the search for meaning is the central motivating force in human beings. When something happens, we search for a way to understand how it relates to our lives. We need meaning, he believed, to live our best lives. The way we do this is through stories. We tell stories about our lives to explain them, our motivations, our strengths, our flaws. Frankl's belief that his dissertation helped him survive the concentration camp is a story he told himself to make meaning out of his experiences. It helped him explain how he found purpose in a world that had seemingly gone mad, where he had little control over what happened to him. Humans in general do this all the time. This is not because meaning is inherent in the universe, but because it isn't. The earth doesn't care who you marry or what direction your career takes. The world does not stop spinning if you don't get to watch the latest episode of your favorite TV show. Science has nothing to tell you about where your life should go. Instead, I make meaning in my life because things matter to me. I look for what things can tell me about my life because it helps me move forward in my life. It gives me a story about the direction I should go. For instance, the story I tell about my ministerial call is that in 2011, I was at a protest against the Gaddafi regime in Libya. During that time, I witnessed a father crying for joy as people on stage talked about Gaddafi's resignation. And I realized at that moment that I wanted to be with people, to sit with them in their joys and sorrows, to struggle with them for justice in a world where so many people don't always have what they need to thrive, to build beloved community where all of us have a place. This story gives meaning and a reason to continue the path I've chosen, especially when things get hard, as well as the direction of my ministry towards one of accompaniment, spiritual direction, and justice seeking. I would argue that each of us has numerous stories like this, even when we're not aware of them. And if you think you don't, let's sit down and talk about it. They are stories we tell about our lives every day, about what's important to us and how we understand the past and the present. They are our own thesis that allows us to continue. To story our lives is to be human, and when we lose story, we lose hope. We write and enjoy fictional stories because we've already told so many nonfiction stories about our lives in the world, it just seems natural. Things go off the rails when our stories aren't working for us any longer, though. I'm well aware that our first reading this morning hits a bit close to home. Not because of the rain, but because of the snow and cold weather. I'm intimately aware that I strongly dislike cold weather and have even joked in the past that if there is proof of a God, it's that I'm serving in the South. It's part of why I like living in places with short winters. And yet this week was full of cold weather and more snow than Dallas usually sees. If I constantly tell myself how miserable I am in the cold weather, I will continue to be miserable. As suggested in the first reading this morning, what if there's an alternative to the old story I'm telling myself about how I'm not a cold weather person? The question becomes, how do I know when an old story isn't working for me any longer? And if the story is no longer working, how can I write a new story to help give me a why for how I will go on in difficult times? And I'd like to invite you to join us in our Doxology. You'll find the words projected behind me.
From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and faith arise. Let peace, goodwill on earth be sung, through every land, by every tongue.
We now take time to honor the sorrows and joys of this community, knowing that we are all interconnected and what affects one affects us all. Deb Freeman shares, thankful for clean running water and that the city of Richmond, Virginia has safe tap water restored. We often take water for granted. We'll light a candle this morning for the sorrow of all those affected by the wildfires in Southern California, the lives lost and the property destroyed. And we light a candle this morning to honor all the joys and sorrows which have gone unspoken and reside only in our hearts. Please join me in the spirit of prayer or meditation in whatever way feels right with these words from Scott Taylor. It will be followed by a moment of silence, which will be broken by our responsive hymn, number 391 in the gray hymnal, Voice Still and Small. Who dreamed you into being? What stories sat in their heart as they imagined what you would become? Who helped you imagine your story? Who helped you see your place in the story of the world and what maybe matters the most? Who helped you understand that you could be the author of your own unfolding? All of which is a way of asking, who listened? Who listened until you could hear yourself speak, until you trusted the voice that is your own, and now that you know what it is like to have the tell of yourself be heard into being, how might you midwife the story of another into existence? You know the kind of stories I'm talking about. Those kept in cramped spaces of silence for fear of how hard and narrow this world of ours can be. Who needs your listening so their story can be set free? Whose stories need held in your heart so it knows it is worth entering into the world? We say it's about listening, but it's really about love. It is through affection that our stories are born. They are wooed into this world. Never forget that. Nor this. It is through loving the stories of others and the stories of our own that we discover they love us back. Blessed be.
Voice still and small, deep inside all, I hear you call, singing. In dark and rain, sorrow and pain, still you remain, singing. Calming my fears, quenching my tears, through all the years, singing.
Our second reading today comes from Timothy D. Wilson. We all have personal stories about who we are and what the world is like. These stories aren't necessarily conscious, but they are the narratives by which we live our lives. Many of us have healthy, optimistic stories that serve us well. But sometimes people develop pessimistic stories and get caught in self-defeating thinking cycles, whereby they assume the worst and as a result, cope poorly. The question then becomes how to help people revise their negative stories. One approach is psychotherapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, for example, which is designed to identify and change people's negative thinking patterns about themselves and the social world. CBT is an effective way of helping people, especially those with serious problems, such as depression or anxiety disorders. But social psychologists have discovered another approach that is simpler and can help people with less serious problems. I call this story editing, because people are encouraged to edit their personal stories in beneficial ways. There are a variety of ways of doing this. In one called story prompting, people are given information that suggests a new way of interpreting their situation. This is particularly effective when people haven't settled on the narrative they will tell about what is happening to them. For example, I did a study with first-year college students who were not doing well academically. They were at risk of adopting a negative, self-defeating thinking pattern in which they blamed themselves and concluded that they weren't college material. We randomly divided the students into two groups. One group got information indicating that many people do poorly their first year, but do better after they learn the ropes and watched videotaped interviews of upper-class students who reinforced this message. The idea was to encourage students to change how they interpreted their own academic difficulties, redirecting them away from the negative, self-defeating idea that they weren't cut out for college, to a more positive interpretation that they just needed to learn how to do better. It worked. This group of students, compared to the control group who got no information, achieved better grades the next semester and were less likely to drop out of college. There are other ways to help people edit their stories. A variety of writing exercises have been developed to help people reinterpret troubling events from their past in ways that speed recovery from these events. Another approach is to get people to change their behavior first. This do good, be good approach was well known to Aristotle, who said, "We become just by the practice of just actions, self-controlling by exercising self-control, and courageous by performing acts of courage." One of the best ways to prevent teenage pregnancies, for example, is to get teens to do volunteer work in their communities. Doing so changes them from alienated kids who don't care about the adult world to kids who feel like they have a stake in their communities. What all of these approaches have in common is that people are encouraged to edit their personal stories in ways that lead to sustained changes in their behavior and well-being. And so ends the reading.
Everything has its seasons, everything has its time. Show me a reason and I'll soon show you a rhyme. Cats fit on the windowsill, children fit in the snow. Why do I feel I don't fit in anywhere I go? Rivers belong where they can ramble. Eagles belong where they can fly. I've got to be where my spirit can run free. Gotta find my corner of the sky. Every man has his daydreams, every man has his goal. People like the way dreams have of sticking to the soul. Thunderclouds have their lightning, nightingales have their song. Don't you see, I want my life to be something more than long. Rivers belong where they can ramble. Eagles belong where they can fly. I've got to be where my spirit can run free. Gotta find my corner of the sky. So many men seem destined to settle for something small, but I won't rest until I know I'll have it all. So don't ask where I'm going, just listen when I'm gone. And far away you'll hear me singing softly to the dawn. Rivers belong where they can ramble. Eagles belong where they can fly. I've got to be where my spirit can run free. Gotta find my corner of the sky.
Some of you have heard me tell this story already, but I'm going to tell it again. In 2004, I was working retail in a job I hated. It was the last of several dead-end jobs that saw me working in stressful environments, frequently for unreasonable managers. At this one, I was at least being compensated reasonably, but I was miserable. To top it off, I felt there was no way out. I didn't even have a high school diploma, so very few managers would even look at me. I was slipping further and further into depression, and I wasn't sure this time whether I would come out. To put it lightly, I was stuck in a rut. I had a story that wasn't working for me any longer, if it ever did in the first place. My breaking point came one day when I was on the sales floor by myself, and 2 customers complained about the wait time, while a third complained because I was told that we were unable to guarantee a delivery time on his furniture, which was the truth. I agree with him, it was an unreasonable answer, but I didn't have control over it. Never mind, I was doing the best I could as one person, and my manager was sitting in the office gossiping with her friend, while a second manager just stood behind and watched me. It was deemed all my fault, and the manager who'd been in the office wrote me up saying I should have done something. And to add insult to injury, she personally called a delivery driver she knew to ask him to deliver the furniture at a specific time in what felt like a complete power play since it was against corporate policy. I went home that night and cried because I felt like there was no way out. I was working at a place where I felt I was supposed to read minds and know when corporate policy could and could not be bent, contrary to all prior training I'd had. The thought of working jobs like that for the rest of my life seemed unbearable. Something had to give. And I started to realize there were things I could do. My county offered free GED study classes, so I enrolled the next day and completed it in record time for the center. The same center offered free counseling to help me navigate the financial aid application process to go to college. Soon, I found myself enrolled in the fall of 2005 at Indiana University Southeast, where I eventually completed my bachelor's degree. And to top it off, within a year, I finally quit that retail job and got a much less stressful position through a friend as a dispatcher for a cab company. Don't ask how that was less stressful. I think it was being appreciated. What I did wasn't unique, though I didn't have words for it at the time. I knew I needed to rewrite my story to create new opportunities for myself. So I examined what was really possible. Though it felt like I was stuck, there were actually resources I could tap into to improve my life. And what's more, doing this restored some power to me and made me feel like more was possible. Now, my journey since has not been straightforward. There have been twists and turns as I searched for what I really wanted. If you told that mid-20s person in 2004 that they would 20 years later be preaching from a Unitarian Universalist pulpit, I would have said you had lost your mind. But what counted was I had a new story to tell myself about my life that got me out of my rut and into a more fulfilling career. Changing the story I tell can be so powerful that it's been long recognized as a possible modality for therapy. Narrative therapy argues that problems in living come from the stories we tell ourselves. By questioning the narratives we use to describe our lives, it's possible to story edit our lives, as our second reading put it this morning. It's not that this takes away difficult things in our life. It certainly doesn't. I can tell you about all the difficult things that have happened to me in those last 20 years. But it allows you to see how many possibilities there are in life at every moment. For example, this morning I could have skipped church and went skydiving. There would have been consequences for that, especially on a day when there's a congregational meeting. And any of you could have skipped church this morning and gone skydiving. It's not something many, if any of us, would have considered, but it's possible if you really want to go skydiving in freezing weather. It doesn't address issues where it doesn't tell me what I need to do, and it doesn't address systemic or economic inequality that might limit the options I can pursue, but it does reveal that in this moment, there are always alternative stories I can live into. You're making a choice to write your story simply by staying here and listening to me and not marching out of this room. And maybe there are intermittent steps I can take to get where I want, even if I'm not there yet. It may just be about asking the right questions at the right time, as I did when I asked how I could get out of my retail job. As narrative therapist David Epstein put it, every time we ask a question, we're generating a possible version of life. What is your story? If it's working, just hear everything I say this morning and tell me, that was a lovely sermon afterwards, Reverend Chris. But if it's not working, maybe it's time to do some story editing. Maybe it's time to figure out what are the possibilities where you do have power. Because as Viktor Frankl put it, any of us who have a why can bear almost any how. I can't tell you that the world's going to radically shift. After all, as I said in the first part, the earth really doesn't care what happens in your life. But humans care. And that's why it matters what your story is, because we need each other. And there's one more thing I want to pose, especially given that our mid-year congregational meeting is after this service. And if some people trickle in afterwards who missed this, I will repeat it in the meeting. We can ask these questions to ask where we want the institutions dear to us to go, whether it's our church or our school or our country. I believe, and I hope you do too, that Horizon is on a path right now, and I believe it's the right path for now, but it's not the only one. Where do we want to go as a church? If we can ask the questions about where we want to go, not only can our church grow and evolve, but it's good practice for writing the stories of our own lives, because what is a church but an extension of its people? And maybe, just maybe, I can write a story about how I am a cold weather person. Philip Pullman once said that after nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the things we need most in the world. I would add, not only do we need stories, but we need your stories to create the story of the world. More on that next week. For now, remember that your life has a story and your story matters. May you have the courage and discernment to live into a story that honors your life and makes the world a better place. May it be so.
We extinguish this flame, but not our commitment to welcome radically, love boldly, grow spiritually, and serve courageously. We do this because we envision a beloved community filled with compassion, helping all to thrive in a just world. And now I'd like to invite you to rise in body and spirit, and join us in singing our closing hymn, number 118 in the gray hymnal, This Little Light of Mine.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Building up a world, I'm gonna let it shine. Building up a world, I'm gonna let it shine. Building up a world, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Our benediction is by Sherry Woodbury. May we have the courage to speak or write the stories within us that need to be told, the stories that make up our lives. May we listen with a loving mind and heart to the stories of others' lives here in this church and others in our world, wider community and world. Let us choose with care the stories that we teach to our children, remembering that all of our stories have power and that all of our stories are connected, for all of life is one. Amen. Blessed be, and go in peace.